Are you ready to bounce?
Hi, I'm Flor Canella, and I'm a local Latina graphic designer and cartoonist. I currently create a comic called Stuck Up Unicorn Comics, and I also am in the stages of creating a young adults noveletta called the Umbrella Chronicles. So with my combined 20 years plus of doing art and graphic design, I decided to venture and dive into the world of comics and now graphic novels. I'm very excited to do my work and also meet and co-create with my husband, Max Inc., who's also a long-term and well-known comic creator who does Blink and comics as well.
I am a cartoonist, writer, and male model, obviously. I've been doing this, getting paid, actually. The first time I got paid was about not quite a year out of high school, and I'm going to be telling almost my age here. That means I've been doing this officially this year for 40 years. And I did strips. I had 2 different weekly strips. I do mostly comic books and mostly autobio and some biographical, mostly slice of life stuff, which I really like. And it can touch on my Latino and Native American heritage, but also all the subcultural, garbage I've done and continue to do, from surfing and skateboarding to the early punk scene, which I'm working on a story over here right now, and all that sort of stuff. And I hope to continue doing it until I can't anymore. And right now I'm working on a graphic novel and the next issue of my comic book, Tortilla.
My name is Glenn Brewer. I have been creating and self-publishing comics since, like 2000. Yeah, 2000, I think I put out my first work, 2001. I'm most known for a 6-part series called Ascario Dar. It was basically about these 3 vigilantes kind of fighting crime and inequality in this fictional inner city. But what I'm currently working on now is a 5-part mini-series called The Rain, which is basically about a young lady who goes to work. She's a chef. She gets up, she goes to work, and the world literally begins to fall apart around her. Buildings are exploding. Bridges are collapsing. She doesn't know why. So the story, the first arc, is basically about her trying to keep herself alive and figure out kind of what's going on around her.
Hello, everybody in virtual land. My name is Paul Meyer, and I'm in Los Angeles, California. And today we're talking about Under the Cottonwood Tree. Let me just read a little introduction. Carlos will chime in here in a second, but it's 1949, and the sleepy little village of Algodones, New Mexico is about to be awoken by strange magic. An enchanted cookie transforms Carlos Lucero from a boy into a black and white calf. It's up to his older brother Amadeo to find a way to change him back. Join them on the adventure of a lifetime as they unravel the many secrets of the forest and discover the true meaning of El Susto de la Curandera.
Okay, I want to introduce myself. My name is Carlos Meyer, and I'm coming to you from Albuquerque, the North Valley of Albuquerque here in New Mexico. Here in Albuquerque, if you're a native from Albuquerque, you reference yourself as yo soy puro buqueño. So I'm a buqueño here. You can see the adobe walls and everything. And anyway, I want to mirror off of what Paul was talking about, how the evolution of this book came about. We grew up in a rural area off the Rio Grande River where it was farmland, there was all kinds of stuff. To make some money on the side, I would raise cattle. And so I would go raise cattle. We had a big backyard, and I would hire cheap labor. And the cheap labor were my younger brothers. Did I ever? I don't know if I ever paid him any money, but I used to, no. But they used to help me with raise the cattle. I would raise them, and then I'd take them to sell barn and sell them. But one time they got out, and they got back in. So Paul had a dream about it. That dream he wrote it down. I wrote it down. And at the time I was a student at New Mexico. Here's my shirt. New Mexico Highlands University. It's a Hispanic college in northern New Mexico, and I got a degree in mass communication. So at the time I was there writing, and I said, "Well, man, this will make a fantastic story." So my older brother Julio, and I got together and I did the story, and he wrote the pictures. In fact, here's one of the original pictures from it. Here's all 9 of the brothers and sisters. You probably can't see this very good, but that one in the middle, that's Paul, as a young guy, 12 years old. He's the youngest. But we shopped it around, and at the time, people were not picking up Hispanic, Latino literature. Nobody. We shopped it in New York, and this small publishing outfit, we knew that Rudolph and I lived kind of by us, and we knew of a place that published his stuff, Keep the Soul. So we took it to Keep the Soul, and they, like Paul said, they published it. And that got the whole ball rolling. In the meantime, I decided to write a screenplay of this at New Mexico Highlands University. So that's when Paul came back in, and we polished it back and forth. And the final collaboration is this. This is the book. So that hopefully that I chime in on my version of, and I'll pay you one of these days, Paul.
My work has evolved as anyone's work has. You know, I mean, I started as a kid. I mean, I was a teenager, and now I'm 22. And no, but you know, so it has evolved in that sense. The story ideas have also evolved. I mean, when I first started drawing, it wasn't so much in writing. It wasn't so much about myself as I was trying to, like every kid, you're trying on different shoes, so to speak, and see what fits. So I was never a superhero guy, but I did do a couple superheroes that were goofy ones, though, that weren't serious, like like Wino Man or something like that. Of course, nobody even remembers what a wino is anymore. You know, and kind of moved through things like that. I did some biographies on Emiliano Zapata, on Jim Thorpe, surf guys and stuff. And then as time went on, I started realizing some of the stories around me that weren't necessarily about me, but people I knew or situations I was involved in. And right around that period is when I first saw Harvey Picar's work. And him and I ended up becoming dear friends. He was kind of a mentor of sorts. And since we were both kind of traveling the same way, but he was the leader. And it's just from that point on, it's still that way, but it's just, the work is just more tight. And it's a lot slower because I'm, you know, especially in the COVID days, you could tell by my beard, I'm doing illustration gigs too to pay the rent and things like that. So I get interrupted a lot, and I have an attention span where you can jangle car keys and I'll be like, ooh, shiny, you know. So, but that's, I think, is kind of how it's just like everything's just kind of tightened up and gotten deeper. And lately I've noticed I've been delving more back into my childhood and my past and my younger years.
I originally started as a fine artist, and I've done all types of medium, acrylic, watercolor, oil, pastel, scratch art, which a lot of people are not familiar with, which is you start with a black medium and you scratch away the black and reveal the white. And it's like the opposite of pen and ink, which also I love as well. It wasn't until I was in high school that I started diving into comics and storytelling. So when X-Men actually came a cartoon on TV, I just dived right into the comics world and the whole way of telling a story through comics, other than Archie and, you know, Casper and such. There was a whole like soap opera and different ways of telling stories. So I went from a fine artist to more of an illustrator, even though I drew at home with the guidance of my dad, who was an artist and who helped me create and develop my talent.
I don't know. I've always been interested in storytelling, and I've always been a pretty decent artist. I mean, even since I was a kid, actually came to Columbus back in '92 to go to college. I graduated from CCAD, so I kind of refine my skills there. I think just generally, I've always been interested in what I like most about comics is kind of the midway point between film and like prose or books, because you have the written word, but you also have the pictures. They're obviously not moving, but I always like that kind of that middle ground. And all you need to create a comic is really just paper, pen, and your imagination, as opposed to making a film. So I was always kind of drawn to that. I work primarily black and white. I don't do very much color at all. I don't really know why that is. When I was in school, I trained in traditional mediums, oil painting, watercolors, colored pencils, markers, all that stuff, but I just kind of moved more towards black and white, and that's all I pretty much do now. In terms of my style, a lot of people, when they see it, they think that it's like woodcutter etching, like the old, like you'd see like in those old biblical, like illustrated Bibles and stuff like that. But actually, the story is this. So what I do is I create value, contrast through the distance and the thickness of lines, as opposed to like what a lot of people do, which is cross hatching. Crossing lines over one another to get variations in value. I use the distance the lines are from one another. So the farther apart they are, the lighter the surface appeals. The closer they are, the darker the object or character, whatever appears. So I started using this. Started using this style because of a book I saw a long time ago called it's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but it was illustrated by illustrator Bernie Wrightson, who since passed away. And I was just I was like, man, this is a really interesting style. So that's kind of where I got it from. I learned later that he got that kind of technique that he was using in that book from an older illustrator named Franklin Booth. So those are the two artists that I owe that probably influenced me the most in terms of my inking style. So I would say also that my process is I work with regular pencil and paper. I scan pencil, paper, and pen. I scan the works into the computer. I use Photoshop to kind of tighten it up to format my books. But I have not really gotten into the digital drawing much, like people drawing on the tablets. I haven't gotten into that. So yeah, that's something I want to explore, kind of get into. I know that'll speed up my process some, but I'm still kind of a traditional person for the most part.
This is a story about, so what is culture? Culture is time and place and the people, right? So in northern New Mexico, southern Colorado, you have an isolated group of these villages that spoke only Spanish up until probably the 1950s, and then English transitioned in. So our mom was one of those she grew up in Anton Chico, and then eventually she moved to the big town of Las Vegas, New Mexico, which was probably 14,000 people, and you could fit the whole town into the Staples Center. So, and that's where she met our dad, Julius Meyer. So what Carlos and I were trying to do is exactly what Rodolfo and I did, what Nazario Garcia does now, and captures a time and place. So we're trying to capture a time and place of northern New Mexico, and of course add fantasy to it and excitement that the children can grab onto. A high interest concept is what they call it. So
our role right now, I feel, is, I don't want to put ourselves in this level, but Mark Twain captured a place in time in rural Mississippi, and he captured the Mississippi Valley. If Mark Twain was alive, he would have made a graphic novel like ours. So ours is in an entertaining and graphic novel version is capturing the Rio Grande Valley. And I wanted to distinguish because there's a lower Rio Grande Valley, and that's in the Texas region, but we're the upper Rio Grande Valley. That's where the Rio Grande starts in Colorado. The Rio Grande River starts, and so that's where we are. So we're basically capturing a place and time in graphic novel. A lot of people, the older generation from New Mexico, they're relating to it because a lot of the words we use, a lot of the Spanglish words, like there's a word here in New Mexico called it's sapo, and I'll just to give you a highlight. And here in New Mexico, the word sapo means something different, literally, than what it means. Because literally, sapo means a toad or a frog, but in Mexico we use it as being lucky. So sapo means you're being lucky, but you'll have to read the book to know why.
Film is a big influence on me, and every cartoonist is what was it? Will Eisner said is a sequential artist, and essentially they're storyboards, and we're doing little films on paper, and that's doing the story arc and everything. So yeah, films can be in a sense an influence. Other artists are. And lots of books. I'm a reader. I like novels and things. I'm going to say it right now. I kind of burned some bridges years and years and years ago when I got interviewed, a small interview, by the Comics Journal. And they asked me what comics was I reading at that time. And I was being honest. I said, not really many, but I started rattling off the novels I read. Not graphic novels, just novels. I was probably reading classics or something at that point. And that didn't go over too well. But, yeah, so I like reading. So reading influences me. Music influences me. I know it sounds odd. I still play music. It's now more of a hobby, and but I'd say more so films and books. And then other cartoonists. I'm really digging a lot of the younger cartoonists that are coming up right now. So a lot of them are my friends now and peers, and it's real exciting. It's an exciting time.
But I also enjoy nature, and that's something that I want to explore with the Umbrella Chronicles, and more of a surreal type of environment and dreamlike stuff. A lot of movies and books, and especially music. And my name, I was named after a Santana song, so music has definitely been an influence in my life, and stories and movies especially. So that's where I want to, focus in all of that I have absorbed, and even more so, and share that. But with the comics and, my sense of humor, definitely, I try to shine with that. And with all the pop culture that I try to surround myself with, comforting and friendly and funny things that I connect with.
Because a lot of artists, particularly when I was young and even in college, everybody aspired. The end goal for everybody was to work for Marvel or DC. A little bit later on, Image came along, so a lot of people wanted to work for Image, but it was typically those three, But I went the self-publishing route, and I would say my biggest inspiration or influence for going the self-publishing route was a book. It came out in the 90s called Brother Man. It was by, I don't want to mispronounce the names of the one brother now. It was two brothers. The person that's most associated with now, I believe his name is pronounced Dawood Abuile. I think that's how you pronounce it. But it was him and his brother who put out a series of books in the 90s called Brother Man. They wrote and drew the books themselves, got the money together to publish it, sold hundreds of thousands of copies. I think, and they did all of this without being any major comic book stores. They did not go through Diamond. They did all of this, all of their distribution either by mail, which is how I got most of my books, and through the Black bookstore circuit, which in Black bookstores are still around, but as with a lot of bookstores just in general, that's just kind of been a transition from actual physical print books to digital stuff, and we can get into Amazon and how it kind of killed a lot of brick and mortar stores. But that's how they distributed their books, to Black bookstores, to Black expos, Black events and stuff like that. So they were the ones that kind of showed me that you can do it yourself.
Probably a little backstory might help out. And I wrote this little essay, and it's called How I Remember It. Located near the Rio Grande and in the shadow of the Sandia Mountains, Alameda, New Mexico provided a playground for wholesome creativity in the 1970s. Dad had a job at the General Electric factory in the South Valley of Albuquerque, which probably paid well at the time and was more than enough to provide for a family of, say, 2 or 3 children. But we were a family of 6 boys and 3 girls, so Mom really had to stretch the dollar in our household. Alas, we paid no heed to any monetary disadvantages. Instead, we were too busy building houses in the cottonwood trees and catching crawdads in irrigation ditches to understand the struggle. We made do with what we had, and one of the things that we had was a big backyard and the desire to harness creativity. Issue number 1 was Caramba versus Uncle Julian. I think there could have been another issue where Caramba beat the Harlem Globetrotters in basketball, but I'm not too sure. Another time, our eldest brother, Julio, led us in constructing alien costumes with large green heads called Goomba Gahambas. We performed a skit called The Band from Far Away and took our Led Zeppelin pantomiming act all the way to Hollywood to perform on the Gong Show. Finally, when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I had a strange dream about one of the calves in the backyard. I told my brother Carlos about it, and bang, just like that, we had a summer project. Soon Carlos would be taking photos of the entire family and placing each of us in little scenes to reenact the dream. Then Julio used the photos to base a drawing out of the story. After that, we would take all the drawings to the local copy shop to make photocopied spiral books. In my dream, the mysterious young boy was actually a buddy of mine from down the street named Teddy Aragon. But for some reason, we replaced Teddy with our cousin Joey Lovato. I guess we thought he fit the part better. Sorry, Teddy. So here it is, The Calf, the Caterpillar, and Joey. 1 part literal dream, 1 part family project, and the very first steps that we made onto the trail, and that eventually led, years later, to Under the Cottonwood Tree, Al Susto de la Curandera. So I'll have Carlos chime in there, but so this was the children's book that Carlos wrote based on my dream, and Julio drew. That's actually me in the front yard there running around. And from that, a few years later, in 1984, that short story was published in the Grit del Sol collection out of Berkeley. It was an anthology that year from Octavio. The publisher was Quinta Sol. Actually, Carlos can chime in here after that. And then finally, years later, that story morphed into Under the Cottonwood Tree, Al Susto de la Curandera.
The graphic novel, like I said, it's been, it was written almost 10 years ago. It's been worked on for 8 years, though I lost it at one point. I lost all of it and had to rewrite it. Then, I usually don't talk about this, but I've been better about it. But then I got sick about 5 or 6 years ago. I can't remember now. 5 years ago, I got diagnosed with cancer. So I have, I got part of my pancreas cut out and all that. And I survived, but I had a year of recuperating, and I didn't work. I was living in a weird place too. I didn't work on anything. So anyway, it's been a long uphill climb to do this, but it takes place in the Tenderloin in the mid 80s. And as I said, I was a maintenance man and a janitor. And, oh man, it was just basically like prison without the guards and no bars. It was just crazy. And I watched and kept copious notes of the tenants that lived there. Since it was the mid 80s, a lot of the old men had been living there since World War II, which was only at that time maybe 40 years prior, 30 years, 40 years prior. So, you know, they were all old guys by this point, but they were they all rotated back, you know, to the United States and from wherever they were from. And San Francisco is where they landed, and they stayed, and they were living in the hotel, and oh, the stories. And yeah, just there was a lot of craziness. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of humor too. There's a lot of funny stuff too. So that's what it's about. And it's called Turk Street Serenade. I hope to have it done, you know, at least in a few months, if not a little longer. And then, but then we have to go through all the editing process and stuff. But I mean, at least to have it actually done, because I already have 2 more lined up I want to do. And then between those, I'm doing my comic book, my ongoing Tortilla, which is just little short stories. And lately it's been more and more about my past, my childhood. And the next one has one from when I was 7 years old. And then the story I'm working on now was the last punk band I was in. And the 1985 and the democratic method of when we go on the road, we had a van and there was no sound system. We had a boom box. So it was like, who got the votes? Tape got to go first. And I was always, because it was me and our road guy, but 3 other punks, and they had always played either hair metal or, you know, MDC, DRI, Black Flag, whatever. And they hated me because I'd play stuff like Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. The last straw for them was when I had Little Beaver on there doing Party Down, who I love that guy. But yeah, they just couldn't hang. And you could almost hear the collective sigh when, so it's Jaime's turn. They're like, oh, you know, it's just funny. So, and that's what the story's kind of about. Just, you know, how punk rock was I? That's pretty punk rock, playing R&B to punks. So.
But as far as being creative, I try to do other things that are creative because I can do other things. And, you know, going for a walk at a park and enjoying nature, that is also being creative, but also it's absorbing creativities. So I can tap into that at another time because I'll pull from that when I am at my desk. Because even though I'm surrounded all by this, it doesn't necessarily help me during those moments when you're, you know, looking at your sketch pad. You know, these are things that are already created, already been done. You don't want to pull necessarily from those. They definitely cheer me up, but it's not where I necessarily pull my inspiration from. Movies and reading, and definitely being in nature. Where I grew up in Grandview, there's definitely a lot of parks and sidewalks that are very quiet that I end up walking around a lot in because I grew up there. So I have a lot of memories, like my first walks to school and the way the light hits at certain times in the morning that you remember, you know, walking to school. So, you know, those are definitely inspirational moments for me that I can pull back to when I'm having those creative anxiety moments. But you know, you have to go out and at least try to have them. So.
Please go to underthecottonwoodtree.com or utcctbook.com. And when you click on there, you can actually watch some fun videos. We had Brooke Bresson read our story to some children for the Lavender Libros in Albuquerque. And you can purchase there. You'll be able to either purchase a digital soft cover or hard cover of our book, and PayPal it, and mailing is free in this time of COVID. So it may take a little longer, but it'll get to you. Yeah, underthecottonwoodtree.com. Thanks everybody. And Carlos?
Hi, I just want to mention that Albuquerque Public School Systems, they have a program. It's called Lavender Libros. Because of this COVID situation, they pick a person from the community to read a book. And I was thankful that they picked our book. So Albuquerque City Councilor Brooke Bresson read our book, Under the Cottonwood Tree. So if you want a taste of a New Mexico fairy tale, go to YouTube, Google Lavender Libros, Brooke Bresson, and she'll give you a taste of our culture here in New Mexico.